public health crisis of drug addiction hit a record high. More than 87,000 people died from drug overdoses over the 12-month period that ended in September of last year.
I thought that there's no way that I could ever use drugs, and I was wrong.
Each and every single addict or alcoholic is running from something.
At age 12, I started my drinking career.
The ongoing opioid crisis has really shown how common addiction is in our communities. Opioid use disorder isn't a personal failing, rather it's a chronic medical condition, and that recovery is possible.
My name is Brandy Irons, and I'm 29 years old. I was born and raised in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and I had my mother, my father, and myself growing up.
Hi, I'm Lisa. I was born in Willows, California, and I grew up with one sibling, and she's 9 years younger than me. I lived a really good life.
So my mom, when I was 3 years old, and my sister had been born that January, it was the springtime, my birth mom left us at the circus. She was on drugs. I later have found out that my dad also was a meth cook and everything, and they run drugs from Lewiston to Oregon and North Carolina. My mom was a prostitute and would hitchhike from North Carolina to Spokane with me. So when we were left at the circus, they took us away and put us into foster care. And we were in foster care until I was 3 to 5 years old. There was molestation happening from an older boy that they had. And when I kind of came out about it, they took us away from the home, and we were adopted finally. At age 5, I was adopted. My sister was 3.
My name is Jessica Galler. I'm a Coeur d'Alene tribal member. I live on the Coeur d'Alene Tribal Reservation. Grew up there, born and raised. It's a tiny little town called Decement. It's literally 2 or 3 blocks, and all my family lives there, so we live really close by. And my mom wasn't ready to be a mom. She was just about 19. She had my brother before me, who only lived for 11 hours. So she had a really hard time after that. Her husband was a trucker, so I must have moved 6 times back and forth, mostly from Tico and Decement.
I had a pretty relaxed childhood, something like a normal family would, and things were really good until they weren't. I was 13 years old, and I found out my parents were getting a divorce. I had a stable, normal home, and everything had just got turned upside down. I started going back and forth in between them every other day because I was the only child, and they were still figuring out what was best for our schedule. It was very taxing, and honestly, it was pretty traumatizing now that I look back on it.
Well, my dad was a police officer, so that was fun. I used to wash the police cars for $75 a month, so I had some money. I was the first child, and so I was very spoiled. My grandmother and grandfather spoiled me, and then came my sister, and that kind of went away. I played volleyball. That was my one sports that I loved. I played volleyball. I rode my bike, hiked. I was very outdoorsy when I was a little kid because they didn't have video games like they have now. So I was outside all the time.
Being adopted, it was a little rough because my parents had adopted not just me and my sister, but they also adopted 2 other kids. So they had 1 natural son and then 4 adopted children. And we all came from pretty horrendous backgrounds. They had to take special training to be able to adopt us. It was rough trying to grow up with all those different backgrounds. A lot of child abuse, a lot of molestations, and all of our history. I was already advanced as a child. I was like 5 years old wanting to hold hands with the boys when girls are supposed to be saying cooties. And so it was hard for me to have friends. If I did have friends, it was like one at a time. And then within a year, that friendship would just quickly disappear because I'd just wreck it. I was alone a lot of the time. I was friendly. People, like, I'm a loyal, friendly person, so like people I'm easy to get along with. But after a while, I just start to like my inner side just starts to think that everyone's out to get me, and so I kind of self-sabotaged a lot.
My mom had my sister when I was about 6, and I started helping with her. My mom worked graveyard. Her husband was gone a lot, so I had to get Haley up and ready for school. She was 4. She did not like to get up in the morning. And I learned from my mom to yell to get things done. And so I would yell at my sister because I had anxiety. I didn't know about that then, but I hated being late. I could not stand the fact of walking into my classroom and have everybody just look at me. And so I would yell at her, and she would go to class crying every morning almost. Teachers asked me a few times, like, where's your mom? Like, where's your dad? Or, well, my mom works, so she's doesn't get home until we're already at school. As I got a little bit older, my mom had my brother, and so I started taking care of him when he was 6 days old. We moved back to DeSmet so that I could graduate 8th grade, and stayed with my grandma and grandpa for a while. My mom started drinking a lot more with my brother's dad. She'd be gone for 2 days at a time, so I wasn't really going to school much. It was just completely normal then.
They tried to be supportive as best they could, but for the most part, they were pretty embellished in the whole divorce. So I was left to my own devices, which is what eventually led to me experimenting with alcohol and marijuana. And I thought that I would never do that. I thought that there's no way that I could ever use drugs, and I was wrong. So when I was 13 years old, I went to a party with an older friend, and we went downstairs and everybody was drinking alcohol and smoking, and it just seemed fun. It seemed enjoyable. And with everything I had gone through over the last year with my parents, I really wanted to be a part of that. And so I started smoking and drinking that night, and I enjoyed it so much that I continued to do it. I knew I had friends that could get it for me, and if not, I would figure it out. There was always alcohol in the fridge if I really needed something, so that's what I went for.
The first time I tried a beer, I was 10, and it was just a Budweiser bottle. And my older friends, they gave me a beer and got me really drunk, and they brought me to the open gym with all the kids in town and the people that ran it, and it was just, I felt so stupid, but at the same time, it was fun. And I don't know, it just became like something that I would just try here and there, like a couple drinks, and then, use gum or something before I went home. But then when I was 12 going on 13 is when I started kind of drinking a lot. My mom didn't really notice. Like, I could go out and get drunk like throughout the day, leave my house at like 9 or 10, and then not have to go home until like 9:30. So by that time, I was already through the day, got drunk, partied, and was sober by the time I got home, and nobody smelt my breath or anything. So it was like, just got away with that for a long time. It was just a lot of that, and any chance I got, I was like, I'm getting drunk. And I didn't just get drunk to drink and have fun. I was like, I'm blacking out. Like, I don't care.
I remember my parents had a party, and at 12 years old, I decided to sip on some cocktails that were just laying around. And I sipped a lot, and I liked the warm and fuzzy feeling. So at age 12, I started my drinking career. I'd just drink when my parents would have a party, and they didn't know. And then when I got into high school is when I started using drugs. That was at the age of, I want to say, sophomore year. Well, I would save the money my parents would give me for lunches, for school, and, and they didn't know, and that kills me to this day as we speak, that they didn't know.
Hi, my name is Josh, and I'm a forensic peer support specialist and recovery coach at Kootenai Recovery Community Center in Coeur d'Alene. My struggles with substance use disorder began when I was 15 years old, and by the time I was 17, I had racked up enough criminal charges to be sentenced to 149 months, which is 12 years, 5 months, in a state prison. It was while I was in prison that I became addicted to opiates. Many people assume that if you're incarcerated that you do not have access to substances. That myth is completely untrue. I have spent quite a few years of my life being incarcerated, and I have always seen illicit substances around me. In fact, it is even harder to say no while you're in that environment. Also in that situation, I believed I would get away with it. I believed it would only be that one time, and I didn't believe the consequences would be the same as if I were not incarcerated. So, using while being incarcerated is a very real problem that gets swept under the rug, as well as how it gets brought in. It's something that needs to be addressed.
My first thing was cigarettes. My grandma's cigarettes, we stole them. I smoked them when we were 7. We'd steal them from there. I think that's where it all started. Alcohol, I was 12, my brother's funeral. He passed away on Easter. And so that's when my family kind of fell apart. My dad became an alcoholic. My mom was a teacher and also had to take care of us. My sister needed attention because of her mental disabilities. My brother needed attention because he was displaying sexual predator behavior. And then there was me, so I kind of felt like I was always pushed on the back burner. And so I acted out a lot. I participated in school until I was expelled for fighting. When I got expelled, I was a cheerleader. I tried out every year, never made it, and one year I finally made cheerleading. And it was like my world. I got drunk and got into a fight at school and expelled right in front of everybody. They handcuffed me and walked me out of the school, so yeah, that was pretty embarrassing. So I dropped out and got my GED. I started seeking help. I just didn't know what kind of help I needed. I went through many counselors, medications.
I started with crank back then, and then I started using cocaine. Crack is made from cocaine. It's boiled and put in a rock form, and then you put it in a little pipe and you smoke it, and it doesn't last long, the high. So then I found crank, and that lasted for days. Still drinking. The drinking got worse. And then I moved on to college, and the drinking was out of control. Waking up was smoking methamphetamine, having a cocktail, going to work, drinking during work on my lunch, doing drugs the entire day. But I can say I was probably a functioning addict. Stopped going to college and just started working, and my drug career kept going very hard. Cocaine was very expensive, so that was just a party thing when a bunch of us would get together, but the methamphetamine was in the morning, definitely, in midday, and then I worked 4 jobs at the time, so it helped me stay awake too.
My freshman year, I met an older guy who also enjoyed smoking and drinking, and that fit in with what I was going for. We started experimenting with other things. That year, I skipped school and went to my mom's apartment while she was at work and got in trouble and was put on juvenile diversion. During that time, I was sober for 6 months, and that was good for me. It helped, but it didn't help for long. After I was off of supervision, I was back to smoking and drinking. The drug use started to escalate. The next year, I started experimenting with cocaine, mushrooms, ecstasy, pretty much anything that I could get my hands on, I was going to use. You know, at first I had felt a little hesitant because, you know, this seemed like harder drugs, but didn't take much convincing, and I dove in with both feet. I continued to go to school and kept my drug use hidden from my parents, and then I broke my pinky playing a softball game at school, and I got prescribed hydrocodone. And that prescription changed my life forever. I loved it. I loved hydrocodone. I loved everything that it made me feel and everything that it didn't make me feel. And I kept getting it. After my prescription was gone, I got it anywhere I could, whether that was a friend's parents' medicine cabinet or I had to buy it off the streets. I didn't care where I got it. I just knew I wanted it and I needed it. And I had a friend come over who introduced me to Oxycontin. He had a small green pill and he put it on foil and put a lighter underneath it and smoked it. And he offered me a hit and he said it was a lot stronger than hydrocodone, and I had already known that opiates were my favorite drug of choice, so this was a stronger one. It had to have been better. And it was. It was better in every sense of the way. It was stronger and it hit you faster, and it was what I was looking for. That had to have been my next step.
I was a runaway because my older brother was inappropriate towards me, and so I was running away from home, and I ran away to the Tri-Cities. I ended up getting lost in the Tri-Cities, and some guy had found me walking along the road, trying to figure out where I was, and offered me some dope. And I remember thinking to myself, dope was pot back in the day, and so I thought it was weed, and it wasn't. It was meth, and that's where it all just took off. I always have this belief that treat people the way you want to be treated. So I always try to be good to other people. People always tell me I'm really nice, I'm really sensitive, and easily taken advantage of. And in the meth world, I was still that same person. That was my in. That was my accessibility. Because most of the time I found that users don't want to use alone. And when you're a good person, they usually want you around. And if you're helpful, they really like you. I didn't pay for drugs for a long time. Like, I got it free because I just hung out with the right people. It wasn't until possibly the last 10 years when I started actually paying for it, of my use.
I was 16. Some of my friends started with them, with hydros, and I took them here and there, and I was just kind of like, oh, they're not, as cool or whatever. Like, it lasts for a little bit, but I want to get drunk. I want to not care. I started when I was 16 and was just kind of fooling around with it a little bit. I still liked alcohol a lot more, so I wasn't too into them at first, but then I got my wisdom teeth pulled, and that's what they gave me, were hydros. And then I just started taking more than I was supposed to, and I was like, wow, I like this feeling. It was because I wasn't taking enough before, I think. Like, more of my friends started getting into it, so they were just, even after my prescription was gone, they were just really accessible. And just constantly, I'd wake up and drink a bottle and pass out somewhere and wake up and do the same thing, or be on pills at the same time and drink for 4 days and then pass out for a little bit and then get ready and go out again. Like, just, it was constant. That's all I did. Like, just on the hydros, I was up for like 7 days. 7 days was the longest I was up, and it was kind of like meth to me. Like, it did to me what it did to my other friends that were on meth. Just smoke them and snort them, chew them. I chewed them a lot. I don't know, it was kind of a blur for months.
My mother had found out about my drug use and kicked me out after I turned 18. I broke up with my older boyfriend and I moved in with a friend and slept on her couch. During that time, I went through detox, and it was a very difficult thing that I went through. I had never felt that way in my entire life. My body was so cold, but I was sweating and I couldn't get under enough covers to keep myself warm. It felt like I was cold all the way down to my bones. I couldn't eat anything, I couldn't sleep. Your legs and arms just don't stop moving. And you know that using more is just gonna prolong the process, but your whole body is screaming to just give it more of what it wanted. Your brain is screaming that if I could just take one hit, I would feel better, only to be followed by another detox. And so I went through the detox, and it was a very difficult time. And after the main detox, there's post-acute withdrawals, which last weeks, sometimes months. And so I was going through that, but I was sober in my mind. I was still drinking and smoking weed, but at that time I wasn't using opiates, and I felt like I was so much better. I got a job, and I started going to college, and I really felt like I was making something of myself. Unfortunately, I still had friends that were using, and I hung out with them, and instead of doing Oxycontin, because they had also stopped, they had switched to something called roxycodone, and we called them Roxys for short. It was the same thing as an Oxy, just cheaper, not as much in each pill, but you could still smoke them, and they were easily accessible. So that was my obvious next choice.
Gosh, I don't even know how I was introduced. I just used. I mean, it just grew. And I wanted to try this new wonder drug they said out there, and I was then hooked on that. I always found the dealers. I got to be friends with like a daughter of a dealer or a friend of a friend of a dealer, and then I would then become friends with the dealer. And I used to, at this point, make it, sell it, do it. It got very, very bad for me. That's how I would get it. I saw what they put in it, how it was made, how crazy it was to be in a house while they're making it. They had to tape all the doors so the smell wouldn't get out. We had to put plastic in the windows and plastic everywhere, and big thick tape around where you open and close the door because the smell would come out, and we were in a good neighborhood.
Then when I had Hayden, and she had problems breathing on her own and stuff right after I had her, and so they took her away, and my mom went with her, and then I was bleeding really bad, so I had to stay there a few more days. But they gave me my hydro script from having a baby, and my baby was sick, and I didn't know what was wrong with her, and I was just stressed out. Well, I guess I used that as an excuse. to start doing pills again. But I kept telling myself, well, I'm just chewing them. I'm not snorting them. As long as I'm not snorting them, it's not, bad. Or telling myself like, well, I have to stay up because if something happens with her, I need to be awake. Like, I am not going to be somewhere in the hospital sleeping in a chair and them not be able to find me if something's wrong with my kid. That's just when it all started again.
An example of a medication that mimics the drug of use is methadone and also buprenorphine. The idea of tolerance and dependence is often what happens to people who are addicted to substances. The cycle of addiction model shows how a person uses a substance to get an effect from it, like intoxication. With increased or sustained use, they gain tolerance or dependence, and then they have a negative effect when they stop using the substance. Sometimes that causes a preoccupation to want to use it again to stop the discomfort of withdrawal or those negative effects that they're having. Again, this is when a cycle of addiction or relapse starts to happen.
My daughter, who is 7 now, was diagnosed with autism, and the doctor had told us history trauma, like drugs while pregnant, can possibly cause or lead to that problem. And so when I heard that, I assumed it was my fault. My daughter had autism, and I relapsed.
My habit had gotten out of control, and I wasn't able to admit that, even though I was using around 20 Roxys a day, which equated to $700 street value. And then I realized I couldn't support my habit. So I made the plausible next switch to heroin. It was cheaper, had the same effect, very easily accessed, and I could still sell to continue to support my heroin habit. And I switched back and forth between Roxy's and heroin and trying to add a little change as if I wasn't completely addicted to opiates. I think there was a little bit of denial going on there, but in my head at the time, it was a smart move. And this continued for another year until I was finally arrested by law enforcement for 4 felonies, 2 counts of possession of a controlled substance and 2 counts of possession of a controlled substance with intent to deliver or manufacture. And those last 2 charges held life sentences, so 25 years apiece. I was in jail, and my judge allowed me to go through an inpatient treatment program before sentencing. And it was 4 months of inpatient followed by 6 months of outpatient. And after completing the 4 months, I went to court, and my judge said, all right, you know what? You did a great job in there, so we're going to put you on probation. We're going to see how this goes. Within 30 days of completing inpatient, I had relapsed at my halfway house, and I was back in front of my judge with new probation violations.
Our goals for treatment of addiction range from patient to patient. Some of this is dependent on what the patient's goals are for their own recovery and pairing that with the treatment goals. The range of goals for treatment or recovery may be sustained recovery for some patients with abstinence of all substances. On the flip side, all the way to minimize harm from ongoing use. Our goals need to recognize that patients with addiction have a chronic disease, one of which has frequent rates of relapse. In treatment, we will use anything we can to minimize the harms of relapse, the risk of death, and the disruptions in their life if they do use or relapse. We often refer to this as harm reduction. Overall, our goal is to maintain long recovery with or without medication.
Well, this might sound weird, but highlights were going to jail all the time because I would hang out with the wrong people when I was in treatment. I wouldn't go to a meeting. I stopped going to AA meetings. I tried Narcotics Anonymous, NA, and it wasn't for me. I didn't like it. So I'm an AA'er, as they say. So I was always in jail, plus in the town that I lived in, My dad was very well known, so I was kind of the guinea pig. I was the person that they needed to show that they mean business. So I was in jail for everything.
So I was going back to jail, and this time my judge decided that it was best to send me to prison. So I went to South Boise Women's Correctional Center, and I was allowed to attend treatment while in the women's prison. And I was there for around 4 months, and it was one of the hardest things I had done.
I got arrested at Walmart for shoplifting, and I had a syringe full of meth on me. In Idaho, a drug charge is an instant felony. I was not aware of that. I kind of thought I was just gonna get slapped on the wrist for petty theft. They wanted to give me burglary and then a felony drug charge. And because I had a history of already being in prison, being in trouble, they were going to call me a habitual offender.
I got a couple of MIC charges, like 6, before I was 18, and I went to treatment when I was 17 and was in there for my 18th birthday for drinking. I left early after the 28 days. My sister came for my family visit and said that she wanted me home, and so I was going to stay the additional 28 days that they offered and then get set up with an Oxford house somewhere around here. And I just told my counselor, no, I gotta go home. And she was like, what? We've been working on all this stuff. And I just, nope, I gotta go home. And then I was in the detox center for 4 days. And then I went to the house for 3 days. And then I left. I left my kids with my brother and his girlfriend. It was supposed to be the plan. When they finally let me call after my 7-day blackout or whatever, I called my grandma first, and I heard my kids in the background, and I was like, are those my kids? And she was like, yeah, your brother called me and they were crying, and I was like, you can't handle them. Like, why do you have them? My brother was supposed to have them. She's like, well, you know, I can't stand hearing them cry, and they wanted me, so I went and got them. I'm like, so you've had them the whole time? She was like, yeah, they did good for the day that you left, and then that night they were crying. My grandma raised all her kids. She raised me. Like, she's, you know, she had her own lifestyle. She was going to the casino all the time. She had her own freedom, like, and then all of a sudden to having 2 little ones who, you know, even just bath time is crazy. And so I was like, I'm coming home, just come and get me. And she sent my sister, and she was like, now if you relapse, it's gonna be all my fault. And I'm like, no, it's not. That was a total waste of time to even try. I felt so stupid.
I wrecked 3 times in a month. First off, I went off a cliff 275 feet into a ravine, little creek at the bottom of a mountain of, like I said, 275 feet. And I took out 10 trees as I launched off the road, a dirt road, and ended up at the bottom, screaming and crying and asking for help. Well, finally this guy on his 4-wheeler drove by and heard me screaming. But at that time I had cut my lip very, very bad up to my nose, and I couldn't really talk. So the ambulance came, the fire department came, of course the police came, and the fire department had to cut to get to me, cut the trees and the branches because it was very, very steep. And I kept saying, I drank and drove over and over and over, because I felt guilty and I was in shock, and it was just very hard I had to own up to it because of my dad. I know better. And so they had to cut to get me out. They couldn't go out the same way they cut in to get me. So they had to cut another trail, and it took 9 officers and EMTs to get me out of this huge cliff. I was very drunk. I blew a .029 or a .029, but I was at the point of severe intoxication. And I wrecked 2 different times. I hit stop signs and I hit another tree in my old car that I had. I hit a rail, the rails that go around the road. I bounced off that and then got out of my car, sat on the ground and rocked and just bawled my eyes out. And that was it for me.
I wanted to stay clean. In my heart, this whole time I had wanted to, but I just struggled with staying clean and sober. And I wanted recovery, The word sounded like something that I really, truly wanted, but I just couldn't get there. I couldn't put the pieces together, and they said that this one would help, so I did it. I completed the program, went back in front of my judge, and he said I did great. He said, all right, we're gonna give this another chance, and he put me back on probation. And the first 2 weeks I did good. I kept up my exercise routine. I got a job. I was living in a transitional house. Things were going really good, and I thought I had it that time. And then I met up with a friend who was still using, and it only took 2 weeks, and I was back to using heroin again. I was still on probation, but I managed to avoid my probation officer for as long as possible. I continued to use heroin and Roxy's if they were available. And then I found out that I was pregnant. And that is when I realized that it was not just about me getting high anymore. And so I went to my probation officer and I told her I am struggling and I'm actively using and I am pregnant. And she promptly arrested me, which I am so grateful for now. I sat in jail at the time, and all I could think of was I was going to have this baby, and I was going to be in prison, and I was going to lose this baby to Child Protective Services, and that was going to be it. And it was terrifying. It was truly, truly terrifying. I was hopeless and I was desperate to find something. So I called all of the local inpatient facilities. I called outpatient facilities. My mom called everyone from the border of Canada down to Boise, and we just both consistently kept getting no, we don't have availability. No, we can't take someone who's pregnant. There was nothing there. And so eventually my day of court came, and I was sure that I was going to prison and I was going to lose my son, and that's just how it was going to be. But God had other plans for me. Mary Wolfinger was in the courtroom, and she informed my attorney, the prosecutor, and the judge that Mental Health Drug Court had decided to accept me into their program, and they had a spot for me that day. And I was so relieved and in shock. I had no idea that they had that place for me. I didn't know what to think, and I looked up at the judge, and he was quiet for a while, and then he looked up at me and he said, "Miss Irons, this court has put you in outpatient, we've put you through inpatient, and a small stint in prison. And if you don't get this one right, this court will be forced to put you through the rest of your sentence in prison. And this court is sentencing you now to complete the Mental Health Drug Court program. Good luck."
I didn't believe there was any possibility of sobriety or life without drugs until I went into that program. I mean, when I went into that program, I went all in. I asked questions, I blabbed my story, you know, I did the classes, and I applied like the thinking reports. Like I did honest, actual thinking reports, not just some, oh, I'm quickly writing out a thinking report an hour before class starts because we have to have these done. Like, no, I went home and I actually did the homework, thought over them for a week, took real life instances, like, because I always felt if I did it half-assed, I wasn't gonna get better. And I wanted to get better, and so I poured my heart and soul into that program.
When we started back in 2004, there was only maybe a couple dozen in the nation. They really were experimental back then, and now they're ubiquitous, maybe is the wrong word, but they're much more mainstream. All 7 of our judicial districts in the state now have a mental health court. We have one up in Sandpoint now. Lewiston has one. Boise, Caldwell, Twin. Idaho Falls was first, we were second. You have to be involved in the criminal justice system, number one. You have to have committed a crime. And occasionally we'll take somebody in on just a misdemeanor, but usually the crime has to be a felony. No sex offense cases, no violent cases. So it's predominantly drug and alcohol offenses or crimes that are related to drugs and alcohol, going and stealing from Walmart to feed your drug habit. Endanger the public, DUIs, driving under the influence of drugs. Those are the typical offenses that we see. Number 2, you have to have a significant and persistent mental illness, an SPMI. So an SPMI is either schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder, bipolar disorder, or major depression, recurrent severe. It's got to be one of those 3 things and one of those 3 things only. We can't deviate from that. There are a lot of people that are in the criminal justice system that have severe anxiety. That alone doesn't do it. If you have major depression, recurrent severe, and anxiety, great. But anxiety alone won't do it. So many people in the criminal justice system have post-traumatic stress disorder and the difficulties that causes. PTSD doesn't cut it alone, but you can have it along with schizophrenia, and then you qualify for the program. 3, you have to have an addiction. Most often it's drugs, and the most frequent drugs are heroin and meth. And I would say anymore, those are running almost neck and neck. So it's those 2 or one of those 2 typically. Sometimes it's alcohol. Every once in a while, it's just chronic marijuana use. It's an 18-month program, and that's at a minimum. That's if they do everything flawless from start to finish. Because they're complex, rarely do they do everything flawless from start to finish. So I do this on a volunteer basis. I don't get paid extra for being the presiding mental health judge. I don't have a reduction in my caseload as a result of being the presiding mental health judge. I do it because I want to, and it takes about 8 hours a week to 10 hours a week. But it's very effective. It's very rewarding, and I would say fun. You hear some heartbreaking things, but I guess most importantly, you see people progress like they've never progressed before in their lives up to this point, and you can't beat that. Almost every one of our females has a trauma history.
It got more violent from boyfriends as I was in my late 20s, 30s, all my 30s, and the first couple years of my 40s. At one point I was put in a trunk, and when he shut the lid, he says, "You're gonna die." And by this time he had beat me severely. My son jumped on him to get him off me, and he threw my son off. and I saw my son's head bounce off the cement, and I absolutely went crazy.
At 17, I got into an abusive relationship with a boy that I went to grade school with, and I was with him for 3 years, and he beat the holy snot out of me. Nothing I did was right, and it took until he put a gun in my mouth before I finally realized, like, this is not a safe situation, and I was able to get out of the relationship. But by that time, I had found meth, and so it made life better. It seemed to quiet things down inside my head. I was punished for lying my first day. I was not punished for using, but I was punished for lying.
Some of our participants have been doing just that for 3-4 decades. So really a lifetime of deception, or let's just call it lying. We didn't start out in 2004 knowing that. Again, this was experimental at the time, and it's not anymore. But we soon realized this fundamental tenet that honesty plays such a huge part in anyone's recovery. You're going to go to jail if you used and are dishonest about it. If you use and call your peer specialist, or call your mentor, or call your substance use disorder treatment provider, or call the crisis line, call your sponsor, and are honest about it, I guarantee you will never go to jail as a sanction in my mental health court. And we tell them that right at the beginning. So we incentivize being honest and disincentivize or punish dishonesty. So you can do things that change that very ingrained behavior.
Another important factor in my recovery is health and physical fitness. I want to highlight the Phoenix program, which is a free, sober, active community that was created to provide a new approach to recovery through fitness and active pursuits. I had the opportunity to participate in the Phoenix backpacking trip in the Sawtooth Mountains and see how their mission aligns with my own passion about the hope, peace, and strength that nature and physical activity can provide along the journey of healing. This is a big part of my recovery. I work out 4 to 6 times a week at my gym in the mornings before work. After work, if I have time, I enjoy going to the lake or hiking. And on the weekends, I try to get outdoors as much as I can.
Counseling is important to me because I need to be able to talk to somebody. I've done the work by looking online for counseling. I've looked into the apps so that I could try to do that kind of counseling. I did a lot of online sobriety, Smart Recovery, AA, NA meetings. I found that was a lot easier for me than going to the actual meetings in the past. I've always had a conflict, so the online ones made it easy for me too.
There is a recovery center in Lewiston. I would go there and hang out. It was sort of like it is here, a safe place to go when you have nowhere else to go and visit. And it's not a meeting. You just go and talk with like-minded people. They have recovery coaching there at the time. They were just starting it. Just people you can talk to about your problems. And I did go to a few AA meetings, and I chose to go faith-based. Just the warmth of people, the love, the warm fuzzy that I get when I get there. There's no judgment. It is faith-based, and that's where I belong.
You know, it's often a 18, 20, 24-month program, so you've got time to address all these issues, and we do. So then they respond very well to, and they feel better than they ever have.
Monday through Friday, you're doing classes, you're doing therapy, you're doing, they got something booked for you, and then on the weekend is your reprieve. So I had to wait until a Monday to get out, and my husband couldn't pick me up. One of the peer supports had to pick me up.
And what a peer specialist is somebody that's been through all of this before. has a mental health issue, is in recovery, and has had criminal justice involvement. And you need all those things to be a peer specialist. At staffing every Thursday morning, starting at 6:30, we have this treatment team, and I look at an individual's behavior and think, well, they're just being defiant, or they're confused because they don't have their mental health under control. I'll think these various things, and Steve can give the input from a recovering addict and say, no, you're having the wool pulled over your eyes, Judge. He or she is doing this because of this secondary gain or whatever.
And so that was how I very first started the program. Released from jail, and a complete stranger who I had no clue of picked me up, and she goes, okay, we're gonna go through your phone and you're gonna delete people. She took me straight to the office. I was still in the process of my intake paperwork. They were still trying to get my history. They were still trying to get my diagnosis going on for that. Within that first week, I was on medication, diagnosed, and kept so busy that I literally had no time to read. There was no time for anything else. We had an early curfew, like 6 p.m. curfew, I remember. I remember thinking, nobody goes home at 6 p.m. But it was like, it worked for me.
And as they start out, I will tell them every week at the bench, are you feeling overwhelmed? Yes, Judge, I'm horribly overwhelmed. I go, good. That's what you should be feeling right now. If you're not overwhelmed, we picked the wrong person to be here. If you've got all the skills you need to survive our program, we didn't evaluate you right.
There was a few hard moments because I had a very busy schedule. It included mental health counseling, substance use counseling, 3 different classes, all of these things I had to do every week. I couldn't believe that I had been given another chance because I had already blown the chances that I had before. And I was released into the program. I was pregnant. I didn't have a place to go, so I was living at St. Vincent de Paul homeless shelter, and I didn't have a car, so I had to rely on my mom and dad for transportation to any kind of meetings, all the appointments that I had to go to, or I had to walk. Pregnant and feeling quite large, that was one of my only options, and I was just thankful to be out and to be able to try again that I did it.
You're very busy. You're going to at least 3 groups a week, 3 treatment groups, in-person group meetings at Ambitions. So 3 times a week in treatment with groups. Another time a week in individual treatment. Eventually, if you go to trauma therapy, that's a different individual session. You're getting substance abuse disorder treatment. You're very, very busy. You're in front of me once a week on Thursday mornings. You have community service to do. You have a lot of material to learn and that you're tested on in order to move up through the phases. So it's really almost a full-time job to start out with.
As you go through the program, your first 3 months, you're in what's called a phase 1. And phase 1 can go longer than 3 months. There's been people that have been on phase 1 for 6 months. It's all about how much you put into the program, if you're honestly doing the program, because they'll know if you're honestly doing it. And then doing certain steps in each step that you do, because there's 4 phases. You have to do certain requirements. And then right after that, we had to do so many meetings a week and so many meetings a month.
Everybody that comes into the program, there's disorganization. They haven't had to accomplish as many things as they have to accomplish, and they have to start doing it right now. In court, they all come up to the bench to talk to me, 2 feet away from me, and I shake their hand and I ask them how their week went and What are they proud of? And if they've got a job, we clap for them. If they've got 30 days of sobriety, we clap for them. If they've got a year's sobriety, we clap for them. There's a lot of clapping going on here from 8 until 10 in the morning on Thursdays.
My very first day at the program, I went in high because I didn't know what to expect or what was going to happen. I thought I could get away with it. And they busted me right then and there on the spot. They're like, "Are you using?" And I was like, "Oh no." And I lied until I got down to Mary Wolfinger, and she was telling me how they were going to UA me at the jail. And I finally cried, and I was like, "Okay, look, I'm high right now." And she made me admit it in front of the whole courtroom, like right after I lied in front of everybody. And everybody clapped for me. And I remember in that moment, like, thinking, what in the world is this program? Like, what is this? Like, people were cheering for me because I told the truth, and I was crying. I was going to go to jail, but only for 10 days. And, like, it just didn't make sense to me. I had no clue what this program was.
Some of our participants have never had a job. Some are 40, 50, 60 years old and have never had a job. Some of them haven't been employed for months or years. So getting a job is a big thing. And I've seen time after time after time where getting a job takes them to the next level of recovery. So, I mean, once they get stable on their mental health medications, you see a big change for the positive in people. I would say getting a job produces almost as much change quite frequently in people. It changes so many things, but I think mostly their confidence level, but also it helps financially, right? It keeps them busy. There's a new network of friends. It does a lot of positive things in their life in addition to just the finances.
Eventually I was able to get a job, which that had a lot of its own problems. I had an extensive record that dealt with drugs specifically, so I was a felon and I was an addict in a lot of people's eyes. And it made it difficult, but eventually I did get a job. And the next thing I had to do was get a house, get somewhere to live with my baby, so that we weren't living in a transitional house, And again, I ran into those same problems. The fact that I had multiple felonies on my record and I had been dealing drugs, and I had that addiction in my past that a lot of people couldn't overlook.
You're being forced to do things that you've never had to do before. You've got to pee in a cup 3 times a week. No one's ever told you have to do that. No one's made you do that. You're being told that you're being ordered to address your mental health symptoms with medication that maybe you welcome, maybe you are very resistant toward. You are being forced to be documentably sober. And testing 3 times a week, we're going to find out about it. So that doesn't thrill most people, for whom that's very difficult to be sober at the beginning. So there's nothing comfortable about being here at the beginning. And defiance or being ticked off or being sullen are all expected presentations.
I had a few team members that were on the mental health court team help me find housing, and I was so grateful for their encouragement. And after constantly having to be told no, just to finally be told yes, I just was ecstatic.
The great thing about that program is that it teaches you the tools that you can use. And it was because of those tools that in April, when I went home, I stayed home. Like, I was able to finally pull myself up out of it. I just kind of had to have that one last leg to stand on first.
Every graduate that leaves this program I mean, after they've been in front of me every week for 18 months or 2 years, whatever it takes, I get to know them very well. And I think over time they trust me to a great extent and listen to my advice and my input. And when you do that, it almost is like a parent-child relationship, and it gives you the same feeling when they graduate as if you had a kid that is going out into the world now on their own, prepared to meet all the challenges that the world has to throw at you. So it's every one of those folks I would view as a success.
People aren't going to get it right away. Like, you don't just wake up in the morning and go, oh, I'm going to be sober now. You know, we all used because we were running from something. We weren't using just because it was the thing to do. Each and every single addict or alcoholic is running from something. Whether it's themselves or the past, it's something though. If it wasn't for mental health court, I probably never would have gotten sober, let alone this time been able to go home and stay home. And the person has to want enough and enough to them. So it took me over 26 years to obtain sobriety. It might take somebody else 30 or 40.
The wonderful thing about the program for me, as the presiding judge, is every week I get to see somebody, if not the majority of our 33 people, do something that they haven't done up to this point in time in the program or up to this point in time in their lives. People that have never had a job or have been long time unemployed. People that haven't since childhood reached 8 months sobriety. You get to watch that every week.
I moved up here and I was not certified yet. And then I was still peer recovery coach and learning. People started liking me up here and the way I present myself and my knowledge of where I've been. That's very important in what we do is where we've been and where we're at now. It's just an amazing feeling that I can help others with my journey. In recovery, I've found that you have to follow the rules. That means you have to follow law enforcement rules, you have to follow the rules, and that's part of recovery. So when someone walks through that door, they don't know it, but there's rules. And I'll let them know, that's not acceptable here. To keep it safe for people that need to come in, that are just coming in fresh and raw. Raw meaning just wanting recovery, can't stop using, so confused, mental health. It's sometimes I have to excuse myself, and because if I'm in the group, sometimes we meet and there's all of us with one person. I'll say I have to do something and I have to go cry because it makes me remember where I was at. And my sponsor told me, never shut that door to your past. You leave it open enough where you could grab that door and open it and look in it and not ever want to go back to that, ever.
Another opportunity they provided for me was to volunteer at the Kootenai Recovery Community Center. And while I was volunteering there, one of the board members asked me if I would like to be on a panel at the Kroc Center for teenage addiction. And I had obviously had a lot of experience with teenage addiction, and so I did it. And while on the panel, I met Lori Otter, who at the time was the wife to Butch Otter, the governor of Idaho. She heard my story and she surprised me at the end of the panel. And she asked if I would like to go back to college. And I was like, yeah, I absolutely would. But I had messed up my funding because I had flunked out of all of my classes. And she was like, well, I'll pay for you to go to college. And I was like, excuse me? What'd you say? And she said, I'll pay for you to go to college. And I was shocked. I didn't think she would do it. I thought that maybe she was just saying it to be nice. And that following semester, I was enrolled in college and working towards a degree so that I could one day become a substance use disorder counselor.
I want to stay healthy and sober because I don't want to be like my birth mom. You know, she's got 4 kids, and as far as I know, 3 of us want nothing to do with her. And I don't want to feel like that. So this time when I went home, we had to delete our contacts on our phone and shut off our Facebooks, delete our Snapchats, all of that. So we did all that before we walked in the house. So we kind of knew what the terms were going to be for us to come home. And so we had already preset that in motion. That's my back door. Every time that I try to get sober before, like all of last year, Facebook, Messenger, Snapchat with the disappearing messages, I could message people and get a sack, and Brandon wouldn't be the wiser. It's this easy way to connect. It's the quickest way to connect. When I was down and out, like, and needed it bad, I knew like one of those avenues was gonna get me what I wanted.
Again, with my mental health meds, it could give me a bad effect, 50% chance of that, or a 50% chance of it helping me be the best mom I can be. And so with that, I was willing to take the risk. And so with Suboxone versus if I don't do something now, I'm gonna go get high. But it's from a pharmacy and a doctor, and it alters my brain, my way of thinking. And if I don't have my depression meds or whatever, like people say, well, if you're coming down from it, then that means you're addicted to it. Like if you're on your Suboxone and you quit, you go through withdrawals just like you would, you know, with pills and stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, if I just quit taking my depression medication, I can commit suicide on impulse. Like it helps. It works. And it was offered to me like right at that moment where I was like just barely hanging on, where I was just like this close. I was putting on my shoes, heading to my front door, but couldn't get off my porch to go next door and use. Like I was getting to that point. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna try whatever options that they have.
We are fortunate that in the last 15 to 20 years, there's been an expansion in the number of medications that can help to treat addiction. This with our understanding of addiction in terms of it being a biological or physiological condition, and finding medications that intervene in these brain circuits and chemicals has helped us treat addiction. There are 2 main ways that medications work for people struggling with addiction. They can block the action of the drug or mimic the substance of use. The common medication for treatment that blocks the substances is naltrexone, which is commonly used to treat opiate addiction.
I had to make a lot of amends this last time with Brandon. Like, there is hurt that I caused, and even to my daughter, attachment disorder, I've led up to for her. I grew up with attachment disorder, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody. And I almost caused it on my kid, so.
I don't think any of us, unless we were in the situation, can really imagine what it would be like to be the child of somebody with an untreated mental health condition, suffering from addiction, actively using, who also has symptoms of borderline personality disorder. I mean, it would be 24/7 chaos for that child.
There was one time last year when I was freaking out because I was coming down and I needed to get high again. And I personally picked a fight with Brandon so that I could storm out of the house and have a reason, and not feel guilty about it. And my daughter held open the door and said, "Just go, Mom, just go." I don't ever want to experience that again.
Those are milestones. Documentable clean time. Your mental health is being successfully managed. You've got a job. But then there's the intangible. I mean, seeing somebody that was timid and ticked off come in happy and confident and talking about reunification with kids and being successful with kids and being a good parent. And for that person, that mom or that dad, to realize I've got skills and I'm clean and sober and I can be a successful parent, that's huge. There's nothing better, you know, and to be able to watch that, I mean, if that ever gets old, I should really retire.
We are people just like them. We just have a disease. We offer clothes, hygiene bags if they're coming out of incarceration and they need a phone. We offer a phone. We have a clothes closet. We do recovery coaching. We do so much right now. Let's say someone walks in, and I'm usually out to greet them right out my door. Because we're a friendly place here. We're warm, we're welcoming. You know, you need anything, I don't care what it is. A bed, a blanket, a pillow, a sleeping bag, a backpack, hygiene. We're gonna get it for you. We have meetings, NA, AA, we have Smart Recovery, which is a non-faith based, it's like an all recovery. They're not like AA or NA. I guess you'd have to go to each meeting, and kind of see and listen about the difference of them. We have mental health wellness. We deal with mental health and substance use disorder here. And I too am co-occurring, which has mental health and addiction. I've added Lisa's Fun Friday. That started in Lewiston, and I brought it up here. Fun Friday to me looks like I come out of this office, which I'm in all the time, and I go out with the people that are out there, and we do arts and crafts, we talk, we cook. I'll cook something and bring it in, or it's a non-cook day because I was so tired. We'll have chips and popcorn and movies and arts and crafts. It's really, really fun. People that are needing stuff when they come right out of jail or prison, usually they get on the bus, they come to Spokane, they transfer the bus to Coeur d'Alene, we come pick them up, one of the staff take them here to get some clothes and hygiene and a food bag, then we take them to their transitional house or wherever they're staying, hopefully in a good spot, and then we drop them off and pick them up the next day and take them to their probation and parole officer and get that going and get that set up and keep engagement going on here in this in the recovery center. We do not tell them what to do. We walk beside them in their choices of recovery.
Life has really changed for the better. My sobriety date is December 14th, 2015. I have over 5.5 years of clean and sober time that I'm grateful for. I have 2 healthy, happy boys and an amazing husband who's also my best friend. We just bought a house, and we both just graduated from Lewis Clark State College together, and mine with my bachelor's of social work and him with his degree in accounting. And I'm currently applying for Boise State University to go through their master program for the social work division. And life has gotten just so much better over the years, which was really what helped me in my sobriety and my long-term recovery. So something that I would say to anyone who is struggling with addiction, substance use disorder, whatever it is, don't wait to get help. I wish so badly that I would have gotten help a lot sooner, and I didn't necessarily know how, but I know now how worth it is to just reach out and get help, because your life is on the line. Every single day that you're out in active addiction and you're struggling, you never know what can kill you and what you'll live through.
I'm most proud of I was able to get it this time. And that if there were to be a relapse in the future, I have the tools to be able to work with that. Whether it be stopping it before it happens or stopping it while it's happening. Because I can't just sit here and say, like, I'm never going to relapse again. It's a very real thing. And so that's why counseling is so important to me, is being able to talk about that stuff. Because when Sherry doesn't talk about it, Sherry uses. And then just stuffs the feelings down. Since I got out of the program, I've had a lot happen. A lot of family stuff has happened, and I just didn't know how to prioritize or categorize any of it. And I forgot all the tools that I had learned and just went off on my bender. Now I'm able to see that. Standing back, I'm able to see that. And I'm really proud of that too, because it took a long time for me to get here. A lot of prayers, a lot of dangerous moments, a lot of, dealing with, is Sherry ever gonna get it? And my daughter, of course, is my most proudest accomplishment. Being able to be a mom to her.
Each week I host meetings at the Kootenai Recovery Community Center of the Just Us group for individuals who have been involved with the criminal justice system. This is another way I can share my unique experience with the criminal justice system and help ease some of the combined pressures of re-entry into society as an individual in recovery for mental health and substance use disorders. We are also unique as individuals, and it is my passion to help people find out what works best for them, because once we break the chains of substance use, life is so beautiful.
My recovery date is July 31st, 2018, and what I'm most proud of is being the mom that I am today, being where I'm at today, and being able to be a good role model for my kids. That's a really big thing for me. It's totally worth it. It's a lot of work, but it's possible.
I believe that there are multiple pathways to recovery. So whatever it is, whatever your niche is that will help you to get sober and stay sober, find it and just dive in, because for us, there's multiple things that helps. For me, specifically, I love to give back to the recovery community any way I can. And I also attend meetings that support my recovery. And that keeps me going. My worst day in recovery is better than my best day in active addiction. And that makes all the things I went through worth it.